The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty main street of Springerville, Arizona Territory, and Beatrice Palmer pressed her gloved hand against the window, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe as she stared at the collection of rough wooden buildings that would now be her home. It was September 1883, and the journey from Philadelphia had taken nearly 3 weeks of bone-rattling travel, each mile carrying her further from everything familiar and closer to a man she had never met, a rancher named Vincent Fletcher, who had written her exactly 4 letters before proposing marriage through the mail. The doubt that had been her constant companion since leaving Pennsylvania now sat like a stone in her chest, heavy and cold. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand. Beatrice gathered her dark green traveling dress and stepped down onto the packed earth of what passed for a street in this frontier town. The September sun blazed overhead, nothing like the gentler autumn light of Philadelphia, and she could feel sweat beginning to gather beneath her high collar despite the relatively mild temperature at this elevation. "Miss Palmer." A voice called out, and Beatrice turned to see a man approaching from the wooden sidewalk that ran along the storefronts. He was tall, probably just over 6 feet, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of summer sky. He wore dusty work clothes, denim pants, a plain cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a battered hat he removed as he drew closer. He could not have been much older than she was, perhaps 25 to her 23 years. "Mr. Fletcher." She managed, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Vincent, please." He smiled, and the expression transformed his sun-weathered face, revealing genuine warmth that his letters had only hinted at. "I am mighty glad you made it safely. The journey must have been hard." "It was long," Beatrice admitted, acutely aware of how rumpled and dusty she must look, how inappropriate her clothing was for this harsh landscape. Back in Philadelphia, her aunt had helped her select what they thought would be suitable attire for a rancher's wife, but standing here in the Arizona sun, she realized they had known nothing about this place. Vincent gestured to a wagon hitched nearby, pulled by 2 sturdy horses. "I brought the wagon to carry your trunk. The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. I know you must be tired, but I thought perhaps we could stop by the boarding house first. Mrs. Henderson has a room ready for you." Beatrice felt a flush of relief, followed immediately by confusion. "I do not understand. I thought we would be married today." Vincent's ears reddened slightly, and he looked down at his boots before meeting her eyes again. "I figured you might want some time to settle in to be sure about things. This is a big step, coming all this way to marry a stranger. I do not want you to feel rushed into anything before you are ready." The kindness in his voice made something in Beatrice's chest constrict. In his letters, Vincent had seemed practical and straightforward, discussing his ranch and his needs for a wife with the same matter-of-fact tone one might use to discuss the purchase of livestock. She had expected someone gruff, perhaps demanding, certainly not this gentle consideration. "That is very thoughtful," she said quietly, and meant it. Vincent loaded her trunk onto the wagon with ease, his movements efficient and strong, and then helped her up onto the seat. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, Beatrice caught the scent of leather and sage, along with the clean smell of soap. He had bathed before coming to meet her, she realized, and had likely put on his best shirt. As they drove slowly down the main street, Vincent pointed out the various establishments. "That is the general store, run by the Hendersons, same folks who have the boarding house. The saloon there, the blacksmith, the doctor's office and surgery, and that building at the end is the church and school both. Reverend Matthews holds services on Sunday and teaches the children during the week." Beatrice nodded, taking it all in. Springerville was smaller than she had imagined, Rower, but there was something honest about it. No pretense, no false fronts, just people carving out lives in difficult country. The boarding house was a two-story structure that looked newer than many of the other buildings, with actual glass windows and a painted sign. Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman with graying hair and a kind face, greeted them at the door with obvious delight. "Oh, you must be exhausted, you poor dear," she exclaimed, ushering Beatrice inside. "Mr. Fletcher, you get that trunk up to the room and then leave us be. Miss Palmer needs a hot bath and a proper meal, not a dusty cowboy hovering about." Vincent grinned at the older woman's bossiness. "Yes, madam. Miss Palmer, I will come by tomorrow morning if that suits you. I thought I could show you around town properly, introduce you to folks." "That would be nice," Beatrice agreed, surprised to find she meant it. Despite her doubts, despite her exhaustion, there was something about Vincent Fletcher that made her want to know more. After he left, Mrs. Henderson drew a bath in a large copper tub in the room that would be Beatrice's, at least temporarily. The hot water was heaven after weeks of travel, and Beatrice soaked until her fingers pruned, washing away layers of dust and fatigue. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a borrowed robe, she found that Mrs. Henderson had unpacked her trunk and laid out a fresh dress for dinner. "I took the liberty," the older woman said with a smile. "You just rest a bit and then come downstairs when you are ready. I have got stew keeping warm and fresh bread." Alone in the quiet room, Beatrice sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself, for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, to truly consider what she had done. She had come west to marry a stranger because her options in Philadelphia had narrowed to nothing after her parents died, leaving her dependent on an aunt who had made it clear she was a burden. Vincent's advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like an answer, a chance to have a home and purpose of her own. But now, faced with the reality of it, the doubts crowded in thick and fast. What did she know about being a rancher's wife? She could read and write, play piano, do fine needlework, all accomplishments that meant nothing here. She could cook simple meals but had no idea how to manage a household in this wilderness. And Vincent himself, kind though he seemed, was still a stranger. How could she bind her life to his on the basis of 4 letters, and a smile? Sleep claimed her before she could spiral too deep into worry, and she woke to late afternoon light slanting through the window. Dressing quickly, she went downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson in the kitchen, and the promised meal was indeed wonderful, hearty and flavorful in a way the food on her journey had not been. "Vincent Fletcher is a good man," Mrs. Henderson said as Beatrice ate. "Known him since he came to these parts about 5 years ago. Works harder than anyone I have ever seen and honest as the day is long. Lost his parents young like yourself and built that ranch up from nothing." "Does he have anyone? Family, I mean?" Beatrice asked. "No blood family nearby. There is an older fellow, Sam Carter, who works for him. They are more like partners than employer and hand, from what I understand. And Vincent has made friends here. Folks respect him." Beatrice absorbed this information, adding it to the sparse facts she already knew. That night, lying in the comfortable bed at the boarding house, she tried to imagine what her life might look like as Vincent Fletcher's wife, but her imagination failed her. The future stretched ahead, unknown and uncertain. Morning came bright and clear, and Beatrice dressed in one of her simpler day dresses, a light blue cotton that was still far too fancy for Springerville, but was the most practical thing she owned. When Vincent arrived at precisely 9 o'clock, she was waiting in the front parlor, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from trembling. He had cleaned up again, she noticed, and there was something endearing about the care he took with his appearance. "Morning," he greeted her, his smile quick and genuine. "I thought we might walk around town if you are feeling up to it. Folks are eager to meet you." They spent the morning making a circuit of Springerville's modest business district. Vincent introduced her to the Hendersons at the general store, where Mr. Henderson teased Vincent good-naturedly about finally finding himself a bride. At the blacksmith shop, a giant of a man named Tom Wilson shook her hand with surprising gentleness. The doctor, an elderly gentleman named Dr. Morrison, welcomed her warmly and mentioned that his wife would surely call on her soon. At the church, Reverend Matthews greeted them both. He was younger than Beatrice expected, perhaps 35, with earnest eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Palmer, Mr. Fletcher mentioned you might be wanting to wait a bit before the wedding. I think that is very wise. Marriage is a serious commitment, and you should feel certain in your heart." "Thank you, Reverend," Beatrice said, grateful that no one seemed to think it strange that she had traveled so far but was not rushing to the altar. As they walked back toward the boarding house for lunch, Vincent said quietly, "I want you to know if you decide this is not what you want, I will make sure you get safely back to Philadelphia. You are not trapped here." Beatrice stopped walking and turned to look at him. "Why did you advertise for a wife? Surely there must be women here who would be interested." Vincent looked out at the mountains visible in the distance, his expression thoughtful. "I have been building the ranch for 5 years now. It is doing well enough, but it is lonely work. I wanted someone to share it with, someone to build a future with. And I guess I hoped for someone who would choose to be here, not just someone who happened to be around." He met her eyes. "Your letters, they were honest. You did not pretend to know about ranching or frontier life, but you seemed willing to learn. And you wrote about wanting a real home, a real partnership. That is what I want too." His honesty touched something deep in Beatrice. "My letters were honest about everything except my doubts," she admitted. "I am terrified I will be a terrible rancher's wife. I know nothing about any of this." "Most things worth doing are terrifying at first," Vincent said, "and I am not looking for someone who already knows everything. I am looking for someone willing to try." After lunch, Vincent asked if she would like to see the ranch. Beatrice agreed, curious despite her nervousness, and they took the wagon out of town, following a well-worn track that led into rolling country dotted with juniper and pine. The landscape had a stark beauty that was nothing like the green hills of Pennsylvania, and Beatrice found herself captivated by the enormous sky and the way the light played across the distant mountains. The ranch, when they reached it, was more substantial than Beatrice had expected. A sturdy house built of timber and stone sat in a small valley with a creek running nearby. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and what Vincent explained were smaller buildings for storage and equipment. The whole operation looked well kept and prosperous in a modest way. An older man emerged from the barn as they approached, lean and weathered with white hair and sharp blue eyes. "Sam, this is Miss Beatrice Palmer," Vincent introduced them. "Beatrice, this is Sam Carter. He keeps this place running when I am too foolish to know what I am doing." Sam's handshake was firm, his gaze assessing but not unkind. "Pleased to meet you, miss. Vincent here has been walking on air since he got word you were coming." Vincent coughed and looked embarrassed, which made Beatrice smile for the first time that day. The house inside was clean but sparse, clearly the domain of men who did not spend much time indoors. There was a main room with a fireplace and simple furniture, a kitchen area with a good stove, and Vincent showed her 2 bedrooms, explaining that Sam had a small cabin of his own near the barn. "I know it is not fancy," Vincent said, watching her look around, "but it is solid, and there is room to grow to make it more of a home." Beatrice ran her hand along the wooden table, imagined curtains at the windows, rugs on the floor, perhaps some of the books she had brought from Philadelphia on a shelf. "It has good bones," she said, using a phrase her mother had once used when looking at houses. They spent the afternoon at the ranch, and Vincent showed her around the property with obvious pride. He had 24 head of cattle, he explained, and was slowly building the herd. He also raised horses, which was actually more profitable. He pointed out where he planned to expand the pastures, where he hoped to build a proper bunkhouse eventually if the operation grew enough to need more hands. Watching him talk about his plans, seeing the life he had built with his own hands, Beatrice felt her doubts shifting. Not disappearing, but changing shape. She was still afraid, still uncertain about her ability to meet the challenges of this life, but Vincent's steady confidence was infectious. He believed in what he was building, and perhaps more importantly, he seemed to believe she could be part of it. As the sun began lowering toward the western mountains, they headed back to town. The wagon ride was quieter this time, but it was a comfortable silence. When they reached the boarding house, Vincent helped her down and said, "Thank you for giving this a chance, for giving me a chance." "I know it is a lot to ask. You are being very patient with me," Beatrice replied. "I appreciate it more than I can say." Over the next week, a pattern developed. Vincent would come to town in the mornings, and they would spend time together, sometimes just walking and talking, sometimes sitting in the boarding house parlor. He told her about his childhood in Kansas, how his parents had died of fever when he was 17, how he had worked various ranches before deciding to strike out on his own in Arizona territory. She told him about Philadelphia, about her parents and the comfortable middle-class life they had provided, about her aunt's coldness after they died, and the suffocating feeling of being dependent on someone who resented her. The more they talked, the more Beatrice found herself drawn to Vincent. He was thoughtful and funny in a quiet way, and he listened to her with genuine interest. He never made her feel foolish for her doubts or her lack of knowledge about frontier life. Instead, he seemed to find her questions intelligent and her concerns reasonable. On the 8th day after her arrival, Vincent asked if she would like to learn to ride. Beatrice had never been on a horse in her life, having only ever traveled by carriage or train, and the prospect was daunting. But she agreed, and Vincent brought a gentle mare named Daisy to town. The first attempts were comical. Beatrice could not figure out how to mount gracefully in her long skirts, and once in the saddle, she felt like she might slide off at any moment. But Vincent was patient, standing at Daisy's head and talking Beatrice through each step. By the end of the afternoon, she could sit properly and walk the mare in a small circle without feeling like she would tumble to the ground. "You are a natural," Vincent said with such sincerity that Beatrice laughed. "You are a terrible liar, but I appreciate the encouragement." His grin was quick and warm. "All right, you are terrified and stiff as a board, but you did not give up. That counts for a lot more." That evening, Mrs. Henderson asked Beatrice how things were progressing. They were sitting in the kitchen, Beatrice helping to prepare vegetables for dinner, a task she actually knew how to do. "He is a good man," Beatrice said quietly, "better than I expected." "But you are still scared," Mrs. Henderson observed. "Terrified," Beatrice admitted. "What if I cannot do this? What if I fail at everything a ranch wife is supposed to do?" Mrs. Henderson set down her knife and looked at Beatrice seriously. "When I came west with my husband 40 years ago, I did not know a thing about frontier life. I was a city girl from St. Louis, and I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But you know what I learned? Being a good wife is not about knowing everything. It is about being willing to work alongside your husband to build a life together. Skills can be learned. What matters is the partnership underneath. The words stayed with Beatrice that night, and the next day as she spent more time with Vincent. She began to notice small things about him. The way he always made sure she was comfortable before seeing to his own needs, how he spoke respectfully about everyone, the careful attention he paid when she talked. He was not trying to impress her with grand gestures. Instead, he was showing her through 100 small actions the kind of man he was. 2 weeks after Beatrice's arrival, Vincent suggested a picnic. He arrived with a basket packed by Sam, who apparently had more domestic skills than his rough exterior suggested, and they rode out to a spot by the creek on Vincent's property. Beatrice was getting better with Daisy, though she still felt clumsy compared to Vincent's easy horsemanship. The picnic spot was beautiful, with cottonwood trees providing shade and the creek burbling over smooth stones. They ate sandwiches and apples, and Vincent pointed out various birds and plants, sharing what he had learned about the territory's wildlife. "Can I ask you something?" Beatrice said as they sat on the blanket Vincent had spread on the grass. "Anything. Do you ever regret coming here? Building the ranch, I mean. It must be such hard work and lonely too." Vincent considered the question seriously. "There are hard days, for sure. Days when nothing goes right and the loneliness feels heavy. But no, I do not regret it. This place, what I am building, it is mine in a way nothing else has ever been. Every fence post, every head of cattle, I worked for it. That means something." "I think I understand," Beatrice said slowly. "In Philadelphia, my whole life was dictated by what was proper, what society expected. I had no say in any of it, and after my parents died, I had even less. At least here, difficult as it is, I could be making my own choices." "Is that why you answered my advertisement?" Vincent asked. Beatrice nodded. "Partly. I wanted to have some control over my own life, and partly because I had romantic notions about the West that were probably foolish." "What kind of notions?" She felt herself blushing. "That it would be an adventure. That I could be someone different here, someone stronger and more capable. That I could matter." Vincent reached over and gently took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her beyond helping her on and off horses or wagons, and Beatrice felt her breath catch. "You do matter," he said quietly. "And I do not think those notions are foolish at all. This place does change people if they let it." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, the creek singing nearby. Beatrice felt something shift inside her, the doubts that had been her constant companions beginning to lose their grip. She was still afraid, still uncertain about so many things, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that she might actually be able to build a life here. That night at the boarding house, Beatrice sat at the small writing desk in her room and composed a letter to her aunt in Philadelphia. She kept it brief, simply informing her aunt that she had arrived safely and was settling in. She did not mention her doubts or her growing feelings for Vincent. Some things were too new and fragile to commit to paper. The next Sunday, Beatrice attended church services with Vincent. It was her first time seeing most of the town's population gathered together, and she was struck by how people greeted each other warmly, asking after families and health with genuine interest. During the service, she was acutely aware of Vincent sitting beside her, their shoulders nearly touching in the crowded pew. After the service, several women approached her, introducing themselves and welcoming her to Springerville. Mrs. Morrison, the doctor's wife, invited her to a quilting circle that met on Thursday afternoons. A younger woman named Sarah Chen, whose family ran a small farm outside town, smiled shyly and said she hoped they could be friends. Vincent watched these interactions with a pleased expression, and afterward, as they walked back to the boarding house, he said, "You are fitting in well. Folks like you." They are being kind to me because of you, Beatrice said. Maybe at first, but they would not keep being kind if they did not genuinely like you. You have a good way with people. Beatrice had never thought of herself that way, but perhaps he was right. In Philadelphia, she had always felt constrained by social rules and her aunt's constant criticism. Here, she could simply be herself, and people seemed to respond to that. 3 weeks after her arrival, as September gave way to October, and the aspens on the distant mountains turned gold, Beatrice made a decision. She was sitting with Vincent on the porch of the boarding house in the early evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I would like to see the ranch again," she said. "And I would like you to teach me what I need to know about ranching, about this life." Vincent turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "I am saying I want to try. I cannot promise I will be good at everything, and I am still scared, but I want to try to make this work." The smile that broke across Vincent's face was like the sun coming out. "We can take it as slow as you need. There is no rush." "Actually," Beatrice said, feeling bold, "I think there has been enough waiting. If you are still willing, I would like to set a wedding date." Vincent took her hand carefully, as if she might startle and fly away. "I would marry you tomorrow if you are ready." "Let us give it one more week," Beatrice said, laughing a little at the eagerness in his voice. "I should have a proper dress made, and we should do this right." The next week passed in a flurry of activity. Mrs. Henderson enlisted the help of Sarah Chen and several other women to help alter one of Beatrice's nicer dresses for the wedding. Vincent and Sam worked on preparing the ranch house, and when Beatrice visited midweek, she was touched to see that they had made curtains for the windows, clearly a laborious task for 2 men unused to sewing. Sam did most of it, Vincent admitted when she praised them. "I just held things and followed orders." Sam, overhearing, snorted. Boy cannot sew a straight line to save his life, but he tried. The affection between the 2 men was obvious, and Beatrice realized that Sam was the closest thing to family Vincent had. That evening, before they returned to town, she sought Sam out at his cabin. "I want you to know," she said, "I am not here to change everything. This is your home too, and I respect that." Sam studied her for a long moment. "Vincent is like a son to me," he said finally. "All I want is to see him happy. You do that, and we will get along just fine." The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon in early October. The weather was perfect, cool and clear, and it seemed like the entire population of Springerville turned out for the ceremony. Beatrice wore her altered dress, a soft cream-colored silk that Mrs. Henderson had helped trim with lace. Sarah had woven a crown of fall wildflowers for her hair. Standing at the front of the church, watching Vincent wait for her at the altar in a new suit that he was clearly uncomfortable wearing, Beatrice felt her remaining doubts finally fall away. This man had been patient with her, had given her time and space to choose this path freely. He had shown her through his actions that he valued her as a partner, not just as someone to cook and clean. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Matthews spoke about partnership and commitment, about building a life together through good times and hard. When it came time for the vows, Vincent's voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving Beatrice's face. Her own voice trembled only slightly as she promised to love and honor him. When the Reverend pronounced them married and Vincent kissed her, brief and gentle, the church erupted in applause and cheering. Beatrice found herself laughing, caught up in the joy of the moment, and Vincent grinned down at her like she had given him the world. The reception was held at the boarding house, with tables set up in the yard and more food than seemed possible for such a small town to produce. There was music from a fiddle player, and dancing and endless congratulations. Beatrice was embraced by women she barely knew, slapped on the back by ranchers and merchants, and generally made to feel like she truly belonged. As the sun set and the celebration continued around them, Vincent drew Beatrice away from the crowd for a moment. "Are you happy?" he asked, his expression almost anxious. "I am," Beatrice said, and realized it was completely true. "I know I was doubtful for so long, but Vincent, I am truly happy." He pulled her close, holding her carefully as if she were something precious. "I am going to do everything I can to make sure you stay that way," he promised. They spent their wedding night at the ranch house, which Sam had vacated for the evening, staying in town to give them privacy. Vincent carried Beatrice over the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture, and set her down gently in the main room. The house looked different than the last time she had seen it. Someone, probably Sam with help from the town women, had added more touches. A rug before the fireplace, fresh flowers in a vase on the table, new quilts on the bed visible through the open bedroom door. Their wedding night was tender and a little awkward, both of them nervous despite their happiness. But Vincent was gentle and patient, and what they lacked in experience they made up for in genuine affection. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Vincent's arm around her, Beatrice felt a sense of peace she had not experienced since before her parents died. "No regrets," Vincent whispered. "None," Beatrice whispered back and meant it with her whole heart. The next morning, Beatrice woke to find Vincent already up, moving quietly around the main room trying not to wake her. She lay for a moment, watching him through the open bedroom door as he built up the fire and set coffee to brewing, and thought about how strange and wonderful it was to wake up in this place, married to this man she had known for less than a month. When she emerged from the bedroom, still in her nightgown with a robe wrapped around her, Vincent turned with a smile. "Morning, Mrs. Fletcher." The name sent a little thrill through her. "Good morning." They had breakfast together, and then Vincent said, "I know it is your first day here as my wife, but I've got ranch work that needs doing. You can rest if you want, settle in and arrange things how you like. Or you could teach me," Beatrice suggested. "You said you would show me what I need to know." Vincent looked pleased. "All right then. But first, you will need different clothes. You cannot work in fancy dresses." This proved to be the first of many practical challenges. Beatrice had no work clothes, nothing remotely suitable for ranch labor. They solved the immediate problem by altering some of Sam's older shirts and pants, which scandalized Beatrice a little, until she realized there was no one around to see her wearing men's clothing except Vincent and Sam, neither of whom cared about Philadelphia propriety. The first weeks of marriage were a learning curve steeper than any mountain. Vincent taught Beatrice how to care for the horses, how to mend fences, how to recognize signs of illness in the cattle. She learned to cook for hungry working men, to preserve food for the winter, to manage the endless laundry and cleaning that came with ranch life. She failed at many things initially. She let the bread burn, scattered chickens she was supposed to be feeding, and once accidentally let 2 horses out of the corral. But Vincent never lost patience with her. He would show her again, explain differently, find another approach. And slowly, gradually, she began to get the hang of it. Sam proved to be an unexpected ally. The old cowboy had a gruff exterior but a kind heart, and he seemed to take quiet pleasure in teaching Beatrice skills that Vincent did not have. He showed her how to make proper biscuits, how to read the weather by watching the sky, how to handle a rope. "You are doing all right," he told her one afternoon about a month into her marriage, when she had successfully helped him doctor a sick calf. "Better than I expected, truth be told." Coming from Sam, this was high praise, and Beatrice felt absurdly pleased. The physical work was harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, and she fell into bed exhausted every night. But there was a satisfaction in it too, in seeing the tangible results of her labor. The garden she planted, the clean house, the meals that improved with practice, all of it was evidence that she was building something real. And through it all, her relationship with Vincent deepened. They talked while they worked, sharing thoughts and stories, learning each other's rhythms. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Beatrice sometimes reading aloud from the books she had brought while Vincent mended tack or sharpened tools. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, content to be near each other. Their physical relationship grew more comfortable and passionate as well. The initial shyness fell away, replaced by genuine intimacy. Vincent was an attentive husband in every way, making sure Beatrice felt valued both in and out of the bedroom. As October turned to November, Beatrice realized that she had stopped thinking of Philadelphia as home. Home was this ranch, this house, this life she was building with Vincent. The doubts that had plagued her when she first arrived had been replaced by confidence, not in her abilities necessarily, but in her partnership with Vincent. Together, they could handle whatever came. The first real test came in late November when an early winter storm blew in. The temperature dropped dramatically overnight, and by morning, snow was falling thick and fast. Vincent and Sam had to get the cattle to shelter, and Beatrice found herself alone in the house, responsible for keeping the fires going and making sure the chickens did not freeze. She spent the day in constant motion, hauling wood, checking on the henhouse, preparing hot food and coffee for when the men came in. When Vincent finally stumbled in after dark, half frozen and exhausted, she had hot stew waiting and the house warm as toast. "You did good," he said after he had eaten and warmed up. "I was worried about you being here alone in the storm." "I was fine," Beatrice assured him. "A little scared maybe, but I managed." He pulled her onto his lap in the chair by the fire. "You are getting tough, you know that, ranch tough." Beatrice laughed. "I do not feel tough. I feel like I am barely keeping up most days." "That is what ranch life is," Vincent said. "Always barely keeping up, always something that needs doing. But you are doing it, and that is what matters." December brought more challenges. A section of fence went down, and they lost a cow to what Sam suspected was a mountain lion. The winter was proving colder than Vincent had expected, and they had to be careful with their supplies. But there were good moments, too. The first time Beatrice successfully baked a perfect loaf of bread, she and Vincent celebrated like it was a major victory. When she managed to stay on Daisy at a trot without looking terrified, Sam actually smiled. And on Christmas morning, when she gave Vincent a new shirt she had sewn herself, his face lit up with such joy that she felt like she had given him something infinitely more valuable. Vincent's gift to her was a beautiful saddle, smaller and lighter than his own, custom made for her by Tom Wilson at the blacksmith shop. "So you can really learn to ride properly come spring," he explained. By the time January arrived, Beatrice had been at the ranch for 4 months, married for 3, and she could barely recognize the frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Springerville. She was stronger physically, her hands calloused from work, her face sun-browned despite the winter cold. She could rope a calf, deliver a foal, shoot a rifle well enough to scare off predators, and manage a household in conditions that would have seemed impossible to her former self. But more than the skills, she had found something she had been searching for without even knowing it, a sense of purpose and belonging. She mattered here, in a real and tangible way. The ranch ran better with her contributions, and Vincent's life was richer for her presence in it. She could see it in his face every day, the quiet contentment that had replaced the loneliness he had carried before. One evening in late January, as they lay in bed with snow falling softly outside, Vincent said, "I need to tell you something." Beatrice felt a flutter of worry. "What is it?" "When I advertised for a mail-order bride, I thought I was looking for someone to help run the ranch, to make life easier. But Beatrice, you have given me so much more than that. You have made this house a home. You have made me happier than I knew I could be. I just wanted you to know." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "When I came here, I was running away from a life I did not want, and I was so full of doubts. I doubted this place, doubted myself, doubted that we could make this work. But Vincent, you loved away every single one of those doubts. You were patient with me. You believed in me even when I did not believe in myself, and you showed me what a real partnership could be." He kissed her then, deep and tender, and they made love with a passion and connection that still amazed Beatrice every time. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Beatrice realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first, she attributed it to the hard work and changes in her life. But when the fatigue and morning nausea started, she began to suspect the truth. Dr. Morrison confirmed it in early March. She was pregnant, probably about 3 months along, which meant the baby would come sometime in September. Beatrice felt a complex swirl of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, worry. She was still learning to be a ranch wife, and now she would be a mother too. She told Vincent that evening after supper. She had planned something elaborate, but in the end, she just blurted it out. "I am pregnant. Dr. Morrison confirmed it today." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and Beatrice felt a spike of anxiety. Then he whooped with joy, picked her up, and spun her around before setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." Sam, when they told him, looked pleased in his gruff way. "About time. This place needs some young ones running around." The pregnancy brought its own challenges. Beatrice had to adjust her work as her body changed, letting Vincent and Sam take on tasks that became too difficult. But she still contributed what she could, and she spent time preparing for the baby's arrival, sewing tiny clothes and preparing the smaller bedroom as a nursery. Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The cattle had calved successfully through the winter, increasing the herd. Vincent bought 2 more horses, including a promising young stallion he planned to train. The garden Beatrice planted was 3 times the size of the previous years, and she was determined to preserve enough food to see them through the next winter more comfortably. Sarah Chen became a regular visitor, riding out from her family's farm to spend time with Beatrice. A friendship had grown between them, and Sarah was invaluable in teaching Beatrice about pregnancy and childbirth, having helped her own mother with younger siblings. "Are you scared?" Sarah asked one afternoon as they worked together in the garden. "Terrified," Beatrice admitted, "but in a different way than when I first came here. Then I was scared because I did not know if I could do any of this. Now I am scared because I care so much about getting it right." Summer arrived hot and dry, and Beatrice grew heavy with the child. Vincent was endlessly solicitous, worrying over her constantly, which she found both touching and occasionally irritating. She was pregnant, not fragile, and she chafed at being treated like an invalid. "I am going to work myself right up until this baby comes," she informed him one particularly hot July afternoon. "So you might as well stop hovering." Vincent looked chastened. "I just worry. I know, and I love you for it, but I am fine. Better than fine. I am strong because you helped me become strong." In September, almost exactly a year after Beatrice had arrived in Springerville, she went into labor. It was a long, difficult process, and there were moments when Beatrice thought she could not endure another minute. But Dr. Morrison was there, and Mrs. Henderson and Sarah, all of them encouraging her, helping her through. And Vincent, who refused to leave even when tradition said he should, stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, looking nearly as exhausted as she felt by the time their son finally arrived. Thomas Samuel Fletcher came into the world screaming his displeasure, a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair in his father's eyes. When Dr. Morrison placed him in Beatrice's arms, she felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. Vincent looked at his son with wonder, touching the tiny fingers with reverent gentleness. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is ours," Beatrice said and started to cry, overwhelmed with emotion. Sam, who they had honored by using his name, held the baby with surprising tenderness and declared him a fine boy. Mrs. Henderson and Sarah fussed over both mother and child, and the house filled with visitors over the next few days, all of Springerville coming to welcome the newest member of their community. The first months with Thomas were exhausting in a whole new way. Beatrice had never been around babies much, and she felt like she was constantly improvising. But Vincent was a surprisingly natural father, helping with the night feedings, walking Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. "Where did you learn all this?" Beatrice asked one night, watching him soothe their crying son with practiced ease. "I did not. I am just doing what seems right," Vincent said. "Same as you." By Thomas's first birthday, the ranch had grown more prosperous. Vincent had hired a young man named Jake Morrison, the doctor's nephew, to help with the increased work. The house had been expanded with a proper additional bedroom and a larger kitchen. Beatrice had mastered the art of managing a ranch household, and she had even started teaching at the Sunday school, sharing the education she had received in Philadelphia with Springerville's children. Life settled into a rhythm that felt right. The work was still hard, the challenges still constant, but Beatrice thrived on it. She had found her place in the world, had built a life that mattered. When Thomas was 2, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news felt less terrifying and more like a natural progression. Their daughter, Emily Rose, arrived in the spring of 1887, a tiny thing with her mother's dark hair and a surprisingly loud voice. "Another screamer," Sam observed fondly. "This family does not do anything quiet." Vincent doted on Emily just as he had on Thomas, and watching him with their children, Beatrice often reflected on how far they had both come. The lonely rancher and the frightened mail-order bride had built something beautiful together. A family, a home, a life. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Droughts and harsh winters, sick livestock and difficult seasons, all the trials that came with frontier life. But they faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. Emily was more bookish, preferring to help her mother with quieter tasks, but she could ride almost as well as her brother by the time she was 5. In 1889, Beatrice gave birth to twin boys, Matthew and Michael, who seemed determined to get into everything and cause double the trouble. Sam, growing older but still sharp, helped Vincent teach the children about ranching. The old cowboy had become the grandfather the children did not have otherwise, and Beatrice was grateful for his steady presence in their lives. By 1892, 10 years after Beatrice had first arrived in Springerville, the Fletcher Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the area. Vincent had expanded the land holdings, increased the herds substantially, and built a reputation for breeding quality horses. The original house had grown to accommodate their expanding family, with multiple bedrooms and a real dining room where they could all gather. But more important than the material success was the life they had built together. Beatrice and Vincent's marriage had deepened over the years into something rock-solid and enduring. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, worked together with the easy rhythm of long practice. One evening, sitting on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard, Vincent took Beatrice's hand. "Do you ever think about that day you arrived? How scared you were?" Beatrice smiled, remembering. "I was terrified. I doubted everything, this place, you, myself. I almost got back on that stagecoach a dozen times in those first few weeks." "I knew," Vincent said. "I could see it in your eyes." "That is why I wanted to give you time, to let you choose this freely. You loved me even when I was full of doubts," Beatrice said. "You were patient and kind, and you showed me who I could be. You loved away every single doubt I had, Vincent. You made me believe in myself and in us." "You did the same for me," Vincent said quietly. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You made everything mean something. You gave me a real home, a real family." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Thomas, now 10, was teaching the twins to rope a fence post. Emily, 8, was reading a book in the shade of a tree. It was an ordinary moment, nothing special, but it was everything. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Philadelphia looking for an escape, for any option that was not dependence on her resentful aunt. She had traveled west to marry a stranger, full of romantic notions and terrifying doubts, and she had found more than she had ever imagined. She had found a home, a purpose, a partnership that completed her. She had found strength she did not know she possessed. She had found love, real and deep and enduring. The doubts that had nearly consumed her in those early days were gone, replaced by certainty. This life, this man, this family, this was exactly where she was meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "How lucky I am," Beatrice said simply. "How a scared girl on a stagecoach became someone I am proud to be because you believed in her first." Vincent leaned over and kissed her softly. "I love you, Beatrice Fletcher." "I love you too," she replied. "More than I ever thought possible." As darkness fell and they called the children in for supper, Beatrice took one last look at the ranch spread out before them. This was her kingdom, built with hard work and love, and she would not trade it for anything in the world. The years continued to roll by in a blur of seasons and growth. By the time Thomas was 15, in 1897, he was working the ranch alongside his father and had developed a particular talent for breaking and training horses. Jake Morrison had married and settled on a neighboring plot, but still helped out during busy seasons. Sam, now well into his 70s, had slowed down considerably but remained a fixture of the ranch, spending his days sitting in the sun and dispensing wisdom to anyone who would listen. Emily had become a teacher, working alongside Reverend Matthews at the school during the week and helping her mother manage the household. The twins, at 8, were holy terrors who kept everyone on their toes but showed promise of becoming fine ranchers themselves. Vincent's hair had started to gray at the temples, and Beatrice had found her first silver strands, but they were both healthy and strong. The hard work kept them vital, and their love for each other never dimmed. One spring morning in 1898, Beatrice woke to find Vincent already up, standing at the window looking out at the ranch. She joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just taking stock," he said. "Counting my blessings." Beatrice looked out at the land they had built into something prosperous and beautiful. The original structures had been added to and improved over the years. There was a proper bunkhouse now, a new barn, expanded corrals. The herds were healthy and numerous. The house was filled with love and laughter. "We have done well," she said. "We have done better than I ever dreamed," Vincent corrected. "And it is all because you took a chance on a lonely cowboy and his rough little ranch. You gave me a reason to believe," Beatrice said. "In you, in myself, in what we could build together." That summer, tragedy struck when Sam passed away quietly in his sleep. The old cowboy had been such a constant presence in their lives that his absence left a hole that could not be filled. The whole community turned out for the funeral, testament to the respect and affection Sam had earned over the years. "He was the closest thing to a father I had after my own died," Vincent said at the graveside, his voice thick with emotion. "He taught me how to be a man, how to run a ranch, and later, by example, how to be a husband and father. We will miss him every day." Beatrice grieved too, for the gruff old man who had been so kind to her, who had taught her so much about this life. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had helped build, with a simple marker that read, "Sam Carter, friend and partner." The loss of Sam reminded them both that life was precious and time was short. They became even more intentional about appreciating each moment, each day with their children, each sunrise over their beloved land. In 1899, Thomas announced his intention to marry Sarah Chen's younger sister, Anna. At 21, he was ready to start his own family, though he planned to remain on the ranch and help his father expand the operation. Vincent gave him a portion of land to build a house on, keeping everything in the family. Emily, at 18, had attracted the attention of Jake Morrison's younger brother, Daniel, who had recently moved to the area. Beatrice watched her daughter navigate courtship with amusement, remembering her own tentative beginning with Vincent. The twins showed no interest in settling down yet, too caught up in the adventure of ranch life and the mischief they could get into. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Beatrice found herself grandmother to Thomas and Anna's first child, a little girl they named Beatrice. Holding her tiny namesake, Beatrice was overwhelmed with emotion, seeing the continuation of the life she and Vincent had built. "Our legacy," Vincent said softly, looking at his granddaughter. "Our love passed down," Beatrice agreed. In the summer of 1901, nearly 19 years after she had first arrived in Springerville, Beatrice and Vincent took a rare day away from the ranch to ride up into the mountains. The children were all old enough to manage things for a day, and they needed time alone together. They found a meadow full of wildflowers, with a view that stretched for miles. Dismounting, they spread a blanket and sat together in the sunshine. "You remember our first picnic?" Beatrice asked. "Right after I arrived. I remember being terrified you would decide I was not worth staying for," Vincent admitted. "You seemed so uncertain, so ready to bolt." "I was," Beatrice said. "I had so many doubts, about you, about myself, about whether I could ever fit into this life. And now—" Beatrice looked at the man beside her, the love of her life, her partner in every way that mattered. His face was weathered by years of sun and wind, his hands scarred from hard work, his body still strong despite the passage of time. "Now I cannot imagine any other life," she said. "You loved away every single doubt I had, Vincent. You were patient when I needed patience, believed in me when I could not believe in myself, and you showed me what real love looks like. You made me strong." "You were always strong," Vincent said. "You just needed the right place to show it. And Beatrice, you saved me too. I was half alive before you came, just going through the motions. You made everything matter. You gave me a reason to build something, to dream bigger, to be better." They lay back on the blanket, holding hands, watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky. The peace of the moment was profound, a lifetime of love and work and partnership distilled into one perfect afternoon. "What would you say to that girl who stepped off the stage coach all those years ago?" Vincent asked. "If you could go back and talk to her." Beatrice thought about it. "I would tell her that being scared is all right, that doubt is natural. But I would also tell her to trust herself, to give it a real chance. I would tell her that the rough-looking cowboy waiting for her is the best man she will ever know, and that the life ahead of her, hard as it will make her happier than she ever imagined. And I would tell that lonely cowboy that the elegant lady from Philadelphia is going to turn his whole world upside down in the best possible way," Vincent said. "That she will be his partner, his love, his best friend. That she will give him a family and a real home and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning." They stayed in the meadow until the sun began its descent, reluctant to leave the peace they had found. But eventually, they mounted up and headed back toward the ranch, toward the life they had built together. As they rode, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her from Philadelphia to this wild, beautiful place. She had been a mail-order bride, arriving full of doubts and fears, uncertain about everything. But Vincent Fletcher had loved her with a steady, patient love that had transformed her doubts into certainty, her fear into courage, her uncertainty into confidence. He had not tried to change her or force her into a mold. Instead, he had given her space to grow into who she was meant to be, had supported her and encouraged her and believed in her even when she did not believe in herself. And in doing so, he had won her heart completely. Their love story had not been dramatic or filled with grand gestures. It had been built in small moments. His patience when she burned dinner, his encouragement when she learned to ride, his pride in her accomplishments, his partnership in building their life. It had been built in the everyday acts of living and working together, in facing challenges side by side, in celebrating victories both large and small. It was the kind of love that endured, that weathered storms and grew stronger with time. It was real and solid and true. As they crested the last hill before home, Beatrice could see the ranch spread out below them. The house lights were beginning to glow in the gathering dusk, smoke rising from the chimney. She could see figures moving around the barn, probably Thomas and the twins doing evening chores. The whole scene looked like something from a painting, peaceful and prosperous. "Home," Vincent said simply, and Beatrice heard the satisfaction in his voice. "Home," she agreed and meant it with everything in her. They rode down the hill together, partners returning to the life they had created, and Beatrice felt her heart full to bursting with gratitude and love. She had come west as a frightened mail-order bride, full of doubts about her decision. But Vincent Fletcher had loved away every single one of those doubts, had shown her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, had given her a life rich with purpose and meaning and joy. And she had loved him back with everything she had, building with him a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their children, their grandchildren, the ranch itself, all of it was testimony to what two people could create when they chose to truly partner with each other. As they dismounted at the barn and Thomas came to take their horses, asking how their ride had been, Beatrice caught Vincent's eye and smiled. He smiled back, that warm, genuine expression that still made her heart skip after all these years. No words were needed. They understood each other completely. These two people who had started as strangers and had become one unit, indivisible and strong. That night, after dinner with the family and after the house had finally quieted down, Beatrice and Vincent lay in their bed, the same bed they had shared for nearly 2 decades. Through the open window, they could hear the normal night sounds of the ranch, horses nickering in the barn, cattle lowing in the distance, the rustle of wind through the trees. "I love you, Beatrice Fletcher," Vincent said, as he had said countless times before. "I love you, Vincent Fletcher," Beatrice replied, as she had replied countless times before. But the words never got old, never lost their meaning. If anything, they grew richer with each passing year, weighted with all the history and love they represented. Beatrice thought about the young woman she had been, stepping off the stagecoach in Springerville with her heart full of doubts. That woman had been brave enough to take a chance, to give herself and Vincent the opportunity to build something real. And in doing so, she had found everything she had been searching for and so much more. The doubts were long gone, loved away by a patient cowboy who had seen her potential when she could not see it herself. In their place was certainty, confidence, and a love that had stood the test of time and would endure whatever the future held. As she drifted off to sleep in Vincent's arms, Beatrice smiled, content and grateful beyond measure. She had found her home, her purpose, her great love. The mail-order bride had become a rancher's wife, a mother, a pillar of her community, and most importantly, the beloved partner of a good man. And that, she thought as sleep claimed her, was the best ending to her story she could have ever imagined. Not an ending really, but a continuation, a life still being lived and loved, still full of possibility and promise. Together, she and Vincent would face whatever came, just as they always had, side by side, doubt-free and full of love. The years that followed brought more joys and some sorrows, as life always does. Emily married Daniel Morrison in a beautiful ceremony in the spring of 1902 and moved to a small ranch adjacent to the Fletcher property. The twins, Matthew and Michael, finally settled down in their mid-20s, both marrying local girls and remaining on the ranch to help their father and brother run the ever-expanding operation. By 1910, Vincent and Beatrice had 8 grandchildren, with more on the way. The original ranch had grown into a substantial enterprise, with multiple families working the land and sharing in its prosperity. Vincent, now in his early 50s, had handed over much of the day-to-day management to Thomas, content to advise and help when needed but finally allowing himself to slow down a bit. Beatrice, at 50, was still vital and active, but she too had stepped back from some of the harder physical work. She spent her time managing the household, teaching at the school and doting on her grandchildren. Her hair had gone silver, and her face bore the marks of a life lived outdoors, but she was more beautiful to Vincent than she had ever been. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times before, watching the sunset paint the sky. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, supervised by their parents, and the sound of laughter filled the air. 28 years, Beatrice said softly. "Has it really been 28 years since I arrived in Springerville? Feels like yesterday," Vincent said. "And also like forever. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Beatrice said. "Sometimes I still feel like that scared girl on the stagecoach. And sometimes I cannot even remember being her." Vincent took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that was beginning to plague his fingers. She was brave, that girl, braver than she knew. She was desperate, Beatrice corrected with a smile. But I suppose desperation and bravery can look similar sometimes. She took a chance on a lonely cowboy, and he will be grateful for that every day of his life, Vincent said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play, the sun set, the day give way to evening. This life they had built, this family they had created, it was more than either of them had dared hope for all those years ago. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Beatrice leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her automatically, a gesture repeated so many times it required no thought. "No regrets?" Vincent asked, echoing a question he had first asked on their wedding night. "Not a single one," Beatrice answered, echoing her reply from that same night. "You loved away every doubt I ever had, Vincent Fletcher. You gave me the life I was meant to live." "We gave each other that," Vincent said. "That is what partnership means." And as the night settled around them, filled with the sounds of family and home, Beatrice knew he was right. They had built this life together. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by an advertisement in a newspaper, and who had created something beautiful through love, patience, hard work, and unwavering commitment to each other. The mail-order bride had found her home. The lonely cowboy had found his partner. And together, they had found a love that would endure, a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren, a story that would be told and retold in the family for generations to come. It was a good life, a full life, a life rich with meaning and purpose and love. And as they sat together watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Arizona sky, Beatrice Fletcher knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she was meant to live. The doubts were gone, loved away by a patient man who had seen her for who she truly was and had helped her become who she was meant to be. And in their place was a love story for the ages, simple and true, tested by time and proven strong. This was their happily ever after, not a fairy tale ending but a real life fully lived and deeply loved. And that, Beatrice thought as Vincent squeezed her hand gently, was better than any fairy tale could ever be.